November 29th, 2020. The Bahrain Grand Prix. Romain Grosjean's Haas collides with Daniil Kvyat on the opening lap, spears into the barrier at over 190 kilometers per hour, and splits in two. The fuel ignites instantly, creating a fireball that engulfs the car. For 28 seconds, Grosjean is trapped in an inferno that looks like something no one could survive. And then, against all odds, he climbs out, stumbling through the flames with his suit on fire, his hands scorched but alive. That's the image the world remembers. Grosjean, the man who walked out of fire. But to understand why that moment carried so much weight, you have to know the story before the flames. A story of speed, promise, crashes, and a reputation he could never quite shake. This is the story of Romain Grosjean, the driver who some called brilliant, others called reckless, and many thought was just too dumb to stop crashing. Romain Grosjean was born in Geneva, Switzerland, in 1986. He grew up with comfort, but not motorsport royalty. His Swiss father was a lawyer, his French mother a painter, but sport ran in his blood. His grandfather Romain Grosjean was an Olympic alpine skier, and his great-grandfather Edgar Brandt was a renowned engineer and weapons designer. Unlike most of his peers who were racing karts before they could even ride bicycles, Grosjean didn't begin karting until he was 14. In Formula One terms, that's almost ancient. By that age, Lewis Hamilton had already been racing internationally for years, but even though Grosjean was late, he was determined to catch up, and quickly, he did. Once Grosjean got behind the wheel, the results spoke for themselves. In 2003, he entered the Formula Lista Junior Series and won every single round, a clean sweep. The next year, he moved into French Formula Renault, and by 2005, he had built real momentum. 10 wins in French Formula Renault, and he secured the title. Then he stepped up to Formula 3 Euro Series, and in 2007, he claimed that championship too, proving he had the raw speed to stand out in Europe's most competitive junior field.
GP2 underway.
Then came GP2 in 2008. Grosjean won the GP2 Asia Series and showed great potential in the main GP2 championship.
The winner of the first race of the GP2 Asia Series is Romain Grosjean.
He wasn't just surviving, he was winning. That kind of rise doesn't go unnoticed. Renault Formula One brought him into their development program, and Flavio Briatore made him a test driver. By 2009, Grosjean had reached the dream. He was on the Formula One grid, but F1 is ruthless, and Grosjean's debut couldn't have been tougher. He was thrown mid-season into a failing Renault team. The car was slow, unstable, and Fernando Alonso was his teammate. Grosjean struggled immediately. At Spa, he triggered a first-lap collision that eliminated Jenson Button, and also caught out Lewis Hamilton. He then crashed in Singapore practice at the infamous Turn 17, the same section where Piquet had crashed in 2008, and then a heavy practice shunt in Brazil shortened final practice to just 13 minutes. Across his 7 starts, including Valencia, Belgium, Italy, Singapore, Japan, Brazil, and Abu Dhabi, he failed to score a single point. The difference between his dominance in the Junior Series and his floundering in F1 was stark. By the end of 2009, Renault dropped him. Just like that, his dream was over. For many, that would have been the end. But Grosjean refused to give up. In 2010, he became a Pirelli tire test driver. Then came 2011, when Grosjean had his redemption season. He won the GP2 series with 5 race wins. He wasn't just back, he was better than before. Renault, now rebranded as Lotus, gave him a lifeline. He became a test driver again, and by 2012, he had a full-time F1 seat. When Grosjean returned to F1 in 2012, he immediately showed what people had always believed.
Romain Grosjean swoops past Lewis Hamilton into second.
He was fast. In the season opener in Australia, he qualified 3rd. It was a shock. In Bahrain, though, he finished 3rd and secured his first Formula One podium. In Barcelona, he set the fastest lap and finished 4th. He added podiums in Canada and Hungary, too. It looked like Grosjean was finally proving his worth. But alongside the podiums came chaos. He became infamous for first-lap crashes. The biggest came at Spa in September 2012. At the very first corner, Grosjean tangled wheels with Lewis Hamilton, which launched Hamilton into Fernando Alonso.
He was a bit sluggish, and there's Lewis Hamilton slewing into the wall, and oh dear, Romain Grosjean and Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton all coming to grief at the
Cars flew. The crash looked terrifying, and it took out multiple championship contenders. The FIA had had enough. They handed Grosjean a 1-race ban, the first in F1 in nearly 2 decades. Grosjean later admitted it shook him and affected his confidence. Still, Lotus had faith and kept him for the next season, because when Grosjean wasn't crashing, he was flying. 2013 was for sure Grosjean's best year in Formula One. He scored 6 podiums in total, third in Bahrain, third in Germany. Then came a stunning run later in the season, 3 podiums in a row in Korea, Japan, and India. And in Austin, Texas, Grosjean finished second.
Grosjean slots into second place, coming around the outside. Lewis Hamilton now challenges Mark Webber as well, and Hamilton puts himself up into
the best result of his F1 career so far. That year, he looked like a driver who could win races in the right car, but still, the mistakes lingered. He crashed 3 times in Monaco, and there was another incident at Silverstone. It seemed like for every run of brilliance, there was a crash that reinforced his reputation. By the end of the year, fans weren't sure which Grosjean was real, the fearless podium finisher, or the first lap hazard. In 2014, Kimi Raikkonen left Lotus, Pastor Maldonado joined and became Grosjean's teammate, and Lotus slipped badly. The car was unreliable, the engine underpowered, and Grosjean's results dried up. He went from fighting for podiums to fighting just to score points. 2015 was better. Lotus recovered some pace, and Grosjean was solid. His standout moment came at Spa, where he finished third.
Romain Grosjean takes third place for his first podium since the US Grand Prix in 2013.
His first podium since 2013. He outperformed Maldonado over the season, but his tendency for costly mistakes remained. At the Russian Grand Prix, he crashed heavily. He wasn't a rookie anymore, and the patience of fans and critics alike was wearing thin.
Grosjean, you can see just above that rear wing. That's through the first part of turn 3, and then he loses the rear initially, Martin.
Yeah, as soon as he gets into the slipstream.
In 2016, Grosjean joined the brand new Haas F1 team. The fresh start looked promising. In their very first race, he finished 6th in Australia. 2 weeks later, he finished 5th in Bahrain.
He finished 6th in Australia, that was good. But here, 5 is a very aggressive strategy. There's a lot of things.
It was the dream launch for the new American team, but soon, reality set in. Haas lacked consistency. Grosjean still scored points, but also had bizarre mistakes. In Brazil, for example, he crashed on the way to the grid and did not even start the race. 2017 was steadier. Grosjean scored in 8 races and generally had the edge over teammate Kevin Magnussen. But in 2018, things unraveled again. He pulled off Haas's best ever finish with 4th place in Austria, but then spun under the safety car in Baku, a mistake that drew ridicule across the paddock. Later that year, he tangled with other cars straight out of the pit lane. The crashes were headline news, overshadowing the decent results. By 2019, the narrative was sealed. Mark Webber had already labeled him a first-lap nutcase back in 2012, and now fans were openly mocking his mistakes. Even when he drove well, it was the accidents that people remembered. In 2020, Haas announced they would drop both Grosjean and Magnussen at the end of the year. It looked like Grosjean's F1 career would fade quietly. Instead, it ended in the most dramatic way possible. The Bahrain Grand Prix, November 29, 2020. Grosjean's Haas speared into the barrier at 192 km/h. The car split in half, the fuel ignited, and flames consumed the cockpit. For 28 seconds, Grosjean was trapped. The world watched in horror, but somehow he pulled himself out, climbing over the barrier with his gloves burning. He suffered second-degree burns to his hands and ankles, but survived. The crash became one of the most frightening images in modern Formula One, but also one of its greatest testaments to safety. The survival cell held, the halo device saved his head, and Grosjean's will to live pulled him through.
So I opened my eyes, I undid the seatbelt, steering wheel gone, and I want to jump out.
It was the end of his F1 career, but it transformed his legacy. He was no longer just the crash-prone driver. He was the man who walked out of fire. So why did Grosjean crash so much? Was it simply carelessness, or something deeper? Part of it was his style. Grosjean was aggressive, fearless, willing to dive into gaps others wouldn't. That aggression won him races in GP2 and podiums in F1, but it also meant a higher risk of collisions. Part of it could also be the cars. The 2009 Renault was undrivable. The Lotus of 2014 was awful. The Haas often lacked stability. When you're driving at the edge in flawed machinery, small errors become catastrophic. And of course, it was his temperament as well. After the Spa ban in 2012, Grosjean admitted his confidence never fully recovered. Under pressure, he sometimes overcompensated. F1 is as much about psychology as speed, and Grosjean struggled with that balance. Romain Grosjean will never be remembered as a world champion, and the easy narrative is to say he was too dumb to stop crashing. The truth is more complex though. Grosjean was a brilliant talent, flawed, fragile, and fearless all at once. He didn't win titles, but he will be remembered for his speed, his inconsistency, and above all, for surviving one of the most horrifying crashes in Formula One history.